to the second part of our presentation. We'll start now with uh, the environmental issues in general. And our first speaker for this session is currently a professor of the College of Forestry and Natural Resources of the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. He is an academician of the National Academy of Science and Technology, Philippines, also a former dean and the chancellor of the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, and he was a principal lead author, and coordinating lead author of the second, third, and fourth IPCC assessment reports, respectively, that is covering the period of 1992 to 2007, about 15 years of involvement with IPCC. Our speaker has also pioneered the applications of geographic information systems in land use planning and watershed management in the Philippines, and currently a member of the National Panel of Technical Experts of the Climate Change Commission of the Philippines. To speak on the topic monitoring of changes in environment to enhance resilience and adaptation, it is my pleasure to call on Dr. Rex Victor O. Cruz. Professor Cruz, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. John. Is my audio okay?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me well?
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for inviting me in this panel. It's my privilege to be in company with well-accomplished scientists in atmospheric sciences. And for my presentation, I'll be focusing on. Oops, sorry. Let me share screen. Hold on. Okay, so for my presentation, I'll be sharing with you a biopic of one of the programs that we have implemented over the years, and this pertains to a program we call MODISERA, Monitoring of Changes in Environment and Ecosystems to Enhance Resilience and Adaptation. And this program was an initial attempt of establishing a network of observation stations across the country in an effort to be able to relate the changes in environment, the changes in climate, the changes in human activities with the changes in ecosystems and everything else that are found inside ecosystems. So basically, um, this program actually originated from a tiny beginning, and this was actually during the time when coconut scale insect outbreak, happened way back in 2010, if I'm not mistaken, until 2014 or 2015 thereabouts. And this coconut scale insect caused a lot of damages to the industry of coconut, affecting four provinces in southern Tagalog region: Cavite, Laguna, Batangas, and Quezon, causing billions of pesos in damages total over those few years. And this outbreak of coconut scale insects provoked many questions, and that includes what kind of species are there. Initially, it was not very clear what kind of species of coconut scale insects are causing this problem. And then, is climate change related to this? Is change in humidity, temperature, or wind pattern, wind circulation, what's the origin of this? Is this, is this from in country, from the Philippines, introduced from other countries? And of course, that leads to the question on how do we control that? And that's where we had breakdown in terms of not being fully understanding what triggered it, what was the origin of this, how much do we know about coconut scale insects life cycle and behaviors, et cetera, et cetera. And this led to questions posed to major government agencies, including the Science and Technology, including UPLB, asking the questions that relates to our preparedness for similar pest outbreaks in the future, and how may we prevent similar outbreaks if ever we can. And that leads to this program Modisra, and the it was an outcome of a short discussion with then Secretary Montejo on his question on how do we address the problem of coconut scale insects. And I just told him that we have to understand more clearly what are the life patterns, what are the factors that affect the life and activities of coconut scale insects. That brings us to the topic on, we need to understand more about the ecosystems of, or the ecology of the coconut scale insects, and that entails monitoring ecosystems, and that entails long-term observations on the different ecosystems. And so this program came about, and that was intended to build a research and monitoring network across the country to monitor the different ecosystems within a landscape unit. In our case, we chose watershed units where we monitor the forest and all other downstream ecosystems that are interlinked to one another. We were focused on understanding what are the impacts or consequences of changes in one ecosystems on the other ecosystems, and how they are actually impacted by climate change conditions and human activities. And this was our concern. Our concern was to understand more clearly the pathways of impacts of direct drivers and indirect drivers on ecosystem and watershed change. We want to understand the quick onset changes that is taking place, and the slow onset changes that are taking place, and that actually uh, led us to design the program to be a long-term monitoring system, because we recognize that uh, uh, there are quick onset changes and there are slow onset changes that happens. um, I'm just trying to, I have this slide just to relate, Modisera, to the current outbreak of coronavirus. And, if it is true that the coronavirus originated from bats, and this is how they, how the guys who studied, this propose it, on how it is transmitted to human beings. And as you can see, uh, from uh, from the bats, the virus can be transferred to human beings, and it depends on how far the human beings are from the bats. It's a question really of, it's a question really of how far or how distant apart are the bats and human beings. And we know that wildlife are driven out of its natural habitats to seek sources of food closer to human settlements due to, for instance, deforestation and forest degradation. And the distance can also be shortened by the fact that human settlements are slowly drawing closer to natural habitats due to unregulated urbanization and land conversion. And with this, the question now leads us to, how far should human beings and bats be from one another, so that we can prevent the transmission of harmful organisms from wildlife to humans, and vice versa. the question then raised is that, for instance, related to deforestation, or how much of the forest can we disturb? How much of the forest can we harvest? How much of the forest can we convert to other uses, without really uh, disrupting the steady state of population of different species in the natural systems. And so, this Modisra was intended to monitor those different ecosystems so that we can understand, one of those that we can understand is the thresholds. Okay, the thresholds of impacts of human activities, the thresholds of impacts of climate change on ecosystems and the way they interact with the other ecosystems. There were, originally we proposed 40 sites, and we ended up with 8 sites because of budget limitation. And then originally also we proposed for 10-year program, and then we ended up with 2 years. After which the program, was not able to get fresh fundings for its continuing operations. And the vision was to expand the sites to 18 sites across the country, trying to cover as much of the different typology of climate, geography, and geology, and other considerations. It has 5 projects. The first project is on on-site environmental monitoring. This is where we monitor, most of the important factors that we identified on site, and this includes monitoring of water, of soil, of biodiversity, of human activities, on site. And yeah, basically these are the things that we monitored. We monitor the different ecosystems, and we monitor cross-cutting parameters such as on socioeconomic, soil, biodiversity, water and climate. And these are examples of our sites. And what you can see here are the colored dots, squares, and cross and stars. These are the areas where we had monitoring activities, ongoing monitoring activities during the program lifetime. And there are 8 sites, as I said, and these are how they were set up for monitoring. The second component was on monitoring the responses and productivity of field crops, annual crops, and development of intervention strategies to enhance crop production amidst climate change. And then the third project was basically the same as the second project component, except that this focused now on industrial and fruit crops, the perennial crops, as they are impacted by climate change. And then the fourth component was on the impacts of climate change on integrated pest management. Our interest here was trying to understand how the different insects that are potentially, that can potentially become pests, are affected by climate change, and how the changes in their ecosystems are basically caused by human activities, are basically, changing their life cycle patterns. And then the last component was the establishment of controlled environment research facility. And this was meant to be a facility where we can study more closely some key phenomena that we observe on field, and bring them to the lab, study them, so that we can isolate the different significant factors that actually drive this phenomena. So that's the intention of this. This is currently now under construction. And then just an example of our what we found over the at least 1 year of monitoring that we were able to conduct is, for instance, here trying to map out the different species of plants, birds, and bats that are commonly found in 2 sites in 2 ecosystems. In this case, agroforestry ecosystems and forest ecosystems, trying to understand what plant species, bird species, and bat species are common to these 2 ecosystems, in these two sites. That will give us an idea on, for instance, how well agroforestry is able to mimic the functions of natural forests, and in that sense also understand, how much of agroforestry can we allow without really impinging on the steady state condition of the resident wildlife in the forest habitats. And then, yeah, we did this also for single site, trying to understand common species, across two ecosystems, for instance. And then we also studied the different feeding guilds of insects, so that we can understand which of these are potential pests for crops, which are potential pests for animals. And we had these different outputs. We had a lot of policy briefs coming out of the program. We were supposed to install open data platform before we ran out of funding, to make sure that the outputs, the real time outputs of the program are broadcasted to all intended users. And let me end now by citing the major challenges that we experience in trying to establish a network of ecosystem monitoring network in the Philippines. Of course, we had difficulties identifying monitoring sites for the simple reason that we were limited to the number of sites that we can install, but there are so much wide variety of physical and biological and even socioeconomic and political conditions out there, in our country. And then the designing of standard monitoring systems and protocols adaptable to all sites were challenging in the beginning. Of course, we were able to address that. Building on-site monitoring expertise, because we believe that the best monitors will be those that are found in sites, especially those that are located in regional state universities and colleges. Security of monitoring systems and personnel, which is a very, very major concern. And then inadequate funds for sensor-aided remote monitoring devices, which were, which we felt then, and which we still believe, are essential monitoring devices that we must have for this type of long-term monitoring programs. Availability of funds to maintain and expand monitoring sites, which is a problem, and then cumbersome procurement process of the government that actually delayed the procurement of important equipment. And even the construction controlled environment research facility was actually hindered by the cumbersome procurement process that we were to undergo. And then the fund sourcing over the long term is, of course, our major concern. And it is still our major concern. It has been 2 years that the program has been without funding, and our concern is how do we get the long-term funding for this type of program. And I envision that if we can get funding, substantial funding, that we can spend half of it for startup activities and half of it as endowment fund, that can support the maintenance of the observation stations over the long term. But and again, basically these are the experiences that we've had, and hopefully, we can start, we can revive this program and start gathering all this valuable empirical data that we need on the interactions of climate change and human activities on the natural systems. So I guess I'll end up there. And again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be part of these panel discussions.
So thank you very much, Dr. Cruz, for that very interesting presentation, particularly highlighting the value of long-term monitoring of environmental changes, but at the same time, the associated challenges of really institutionalizing such a system.